everyone. Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through the best budget Commander cards out there from Tarkir. These cards are not only budget friendly, but they pack a punch. Let's jump into them. First up, and this one is going to be absolutely huge for the right type of deck out there. That is Hardened Tactician, currently 90 cents. Now, these prices, well, are not finalized. The actual set has been spoiled. The full set has been spoiled, but it is not officially out yet. I believe it releases on April 11th. When it does, I would still expect these prices to be budget friendly, and this one to be potentially even lower. Again, it is an uncommon. A 2/4 Human Warrior for 3 mana in Orzhov. Pay 1, sacrifice a token, draw a card. This is a powerhouse in the right deck. This is a card that, well, again, has a limitation compared to some similar cards when it comes to a sacrifice outlet, which, yeah, in certain strategies out there like Aristocrat-style decks cannot get enough of them. This does have a limitation that you have to pay a mana and you can only sacrifice tokens. That being said, the payoff is massive, drawing a card. So, whereas other sacrifice outlets might be free, and yes, those are still incredibly needed and amazing, this one allows you to, well, just pay a single mana to basically draw a card, changing out those creature fodder tokens that you might have out there in those types of strategies into actual card advantage, which is massive. When it comes to somewhat similar cards we've seen in the past, typically you're paying at least 2 mana to sacrifice something to draw a card, so cutting that in half, yeah, this is a huge improvement and a massive card, again, for Aristocrat-style strategies, or even just go-wide token strategies as well, or ones that actually utilize different kinds of tokens, too. I'm talking about food, I'm talking about treasures, I'm talking about clues, etc., etc. This is a huge card in a great budget edition. Next up, sticking with the creatures for now, let's talk about Stalwart Successor. Currently just 28 cents right now, an incredibly budget-friendly card, a 3/2 Human Warrior with Menace that costs 3 mana in Golgari. Whenever one or more counters are put on a creature you control, if it's the first time those counters have been put on that creature this turn, put a +1 counter on that creature. So, basically a way to, again, not necessarily double up the number of counters that you are getting necessarily in a turn, but to give you an additional counter, essentially, whenever that happens, with a limit of once per turn. So it doesn't matter what kind of counter is actually being placed on that creature. It could be absolutely anything. It could be a -1/-1 counter, which again could be a downside, essentially, with a persist creature, but then that gets eliminated right then and there, at least once in that turn. Or it could be a flying counter, it could be a charge counter, etc., 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 and of course, yes, a +1 counter. Regardless, you are getting an additional +1 counter on that creature, which is absolutely huge. So yes, if you are looking for yet another great way to add additional counters to your strategy, whether again that's just a simple +1 counters build, or again something more complex, something that has again those different kinds of counters on them, something else that you're looking to do on top of that, definitely keep that in mind. That being said, again, yeah, every single turn getting an extra counter on them, no matter what that counter is, that is a really great addition. Stalwart Successor, a really good budget-friendly card. Speaking of counters, another huge one, another great budget edition, we've got Host of the Hereafter, a 2/2 Zombie Warlock for 4 mana in Golgari. It enters with 2 counters on it. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters up to 1 target creature you control. Basically, this is kind of a different form of the Obelisk, but in creature form as well, and with a very relevant creature type being zombie. Now, when it comes to zombie decks, typically those don't have green. That being said, +1 counter builds definitely have green and black, and this is a huge card for those builds. It is a way to essentially ensure that you are not losing out on those counters when a creature is dealt with, or maybe when you even sacrifice that creature for value, but it is a way to transfer those counters, to ensure those counters stick around, and those counters keep building up on those creatures. So, again, a different kind of version of the Obelisk-ish, a good way to move those counters around, a good way to ensure that all that value that you've been building up on your creatures stays there as long as you at least control one creature left standing can get all the counters for you. And again, can just be a massive threat. You can just keep moving things around, but yeah, being able to actually utilize them in some really exciting ways. This is a card that, again, helps you preserve your board state in a different, unique way. It's a very good budget card to consider, especially for a counter strategy. The final creature that I'm going to be highlighting on this episode is Venerated Storm Singer, a 3/3 Orc Cleric for 4 mana in black, mobilize 1. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Now, we of course have seen this effect many times before. I mean, this is kind of like copy-paste Zulaport Cutthroat, plus a little bit of mana, plus a small addition as well, and changing up the creature type, but basically, yeah, there's a reason why this template works. There's a reason why this is a, well, good approach for certain strategies out there. This is a great type of card, of course, for aristocrat-style strategies, or just in general, go-wide strategies too. Token production strategies as well with that mobilize 1. Being able to drain your opponents whenever your creatures die, yeah, for certain type of strategies out there, you can just turn this into a powerhouse that takes your opponents out in absolutely no time, especially in combination with all the other Blood Artist type effects. I mean, at a certain point, we're going to get to the point where you can just build an entire Blood Artist deck, where everything is a Blood Artist basically outside of your commander, which very well might also be a Blood Artist. So yeah, this is a great type of card to, again, add to that pile of Zulaport Cutthroat Blood Artist type cards that drain your opponents. And this one especially, again, can actually give you that creature fodder while you're at it as well with that mobilize 1. So if you've got other benefits for actually losing those creatures, if you've got other ways to maybe even get more tokens, more copies of that same creature, again, like doubling season type effects, essentially Noid Procession type effects, you can take even more advantage of that mobilize too. A great card, a great new budget addition for many decks out there. Next up, let's touch on one enchantment that I want to highlight with Encroaching Dragon Storm. This is an enchantment for 4 mana in green. When it enters, search the library, put the 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Whenever a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. Now, dragon decks can definitely consider this one. If you just have Explosive Vegetation in a dragon deck, you're probably going to swap that out with this if you're looking to do so. That being said, dragon decks aren't the only types of decks to consider this card. This is a great ETB, essentially, again, ramp 2 for 4 mana, Explosive Vegetation, but on an enchantment, on a permanent. So if you, say, have a blink deck that can actually blink enchantments, my goodness, the amount of value you can get out of this. You can just keep getting more and more and more lands. I mean, at a certain point, if you can blink it enough times, be able to get basically all the basics out of your deck, and you've ramped to oblivion, and your opponents are going to be in big trouble. On top of that, of course, an Enchantress-style strategy might be able to consider this as well, especially ones that can reduce the cost of enchantments, so you're casting it for even less. Or ones that just care about, again, literally everything in the deck being an enchantment, so you get those constellation triggers, those enchantment enter the battlefield triggers. Obviously, commanders as well that maybe can double up ETBs can take advantage of this, more so than, say, again, an Explosive Vegetation. So yeah, we have been getting more and more different versions of Explosive Vegetation over the years, and this is yet another great one that is on an ETB, one that is on an enchantment, and one that does have a relevant creature type that it can work with as well. Keep in mind, changelings as well are dragons too, so that could bounce it as well. But yeah, being able to blink it especially, those types of strategies out there can really, really, really make this new budget card work. Moving on, let's talk about some instants. And we're going to start things off with Auroral Procession, an instant for 2 mana in Simic. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Very simple, very effective. It is a kind of brand new version of a card that came out, I believe, all the way back in Alpha with Regrowth. A card that essentially, yeah, we're not getting any kind of a cost savings on it. Regrowth does cost 1 and a green. We have a slightly more complex mana value, if you want to call that, with 2 pips instead of just 1. That being said, we do gain that instant speed, which is massive, and something that we typically really don't see with these types of cards. Being able to instant speed bring a card back from our graveyard to our hand can really change up how a regrowth effect works. Because, again, our opponents might see certain things coming if we're doing a regrowth on our turn. If we're like, oh yeah, the board's getting a bit complex, we probably need to wrath the board, but I don't have enough mana on this turn to both regrowth a card out of my graveyard and wrath the board. That being said, again, if you, right before your turn happens, are like, oh, okay, I've got 2 extra mana lying around, which is very easy for you to do. I'll utilize that on this. I'll go get that Wrath back out of my graveyard, and my opponents, again, will not have enough time to react to it. Versus, if it was a sorcery speed effect and I need to save up another turn's worth of mana. That being said, yeah, the flexibility of it is great. The same amount of mana that you're putting into a regrowth you put into this, if you're already using regrowth in a deck, and this regrowth type effects, it's definitely another one to throw in there too. But yeah, the flexibility makes it even more so enjoyable. Definitely a very good card for the right strategy out there. Moving on to yet another great instant, we've got Duty Beyond Death. An instant for 1 and a white, 2 mana in total. This costs to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature as well. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Now, when it comes to those protect your entire team type effects, typically, and I do say typically because there are some exceptions, that will cost you 3 mana. In general, it does cost you 3 mana. There are the heroic interventions, but yeah, those are few and far between. There's like 1 or 2 of those that basically cost 2 mana that protect your entire board and basically have no downside to them. This does have a slight downside to it, but even that can be an upside for the right strategy. As I mentioned so far in this episode, of course, aristocrat-style decks do exist. Those actually want to sacrifice creatures, so yeah, you're going to sacrifice one of those creatures for those types of decks out there. Or again, for a go-wide strategy, you've got so many tokens, you're fine sacrificing one. Or even in not those kinds of strategies, if you've got enough creatures on the board, you're going to be willing to just sacrifice one of them to protect the other ones. Even if you just have 3 creatures on the board, you're like, yeah, I'll sacrifice that one to protect the other 2. On top of that, again, there is a slight downside, sure, which can be an upside, but also there's this inherent upside with this as well. Protect your entire team, and also, they get stronger. You get that counter on every single one of them. You are building up your army at the exact same time. On top of that, again, of course, this works really well into, well, +1 counter builds, +1 counter synergies. You want to be able to get a counter on every single one of your creatures. Now there you go. You've already started the process. So if you've got any proliferate type effects, of course, you can really take advantage of those more and more and more. So yeah, this is an incredible way to save your entire team again for just 2 mana with limited downside that can be an upside with extra value as well. This is a huge card for just 28 cents right now. Definitely a great budget buy. Moving on to Frontline Rush, yet another great instant spell. Just 36 cents for this one, and this is a gem. An instant for just 2 mana in Boros. Choose 1, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Target creature gets +X/+X to have turn X the number of creatures you control. Oh my goodness, Cranko decks out there are very upset that this is not in mono red, because this would be a shoe-in for that deck. Obviously, this is a huge card in that it helps you out in 2 ways, in 2 very efficient ways. First of all, again, when it comes to the amount of mana that you expect to spend on making 2 1/1s, 2 tokens, that's 2 mana. And usually that's sorcery speed. You get it at instant speed though. Or again, if you already have a, big army, if you already have a lot of creatures in play, you can utilize this as an amazing out of nowhere combat trick where you pump a creature to oblivion. You say, hey, you know what? I've got 20 creatures in play, whatever it is for my token go wide strategy. I'm going to pump this one creature an absurd amount. This can be a game-ending spell for the right deck out there. Again, you swing with your commander. Might be a tiny little commander. It gets through your opponent's like, I'm not going to block that, whatever. And I'm going to block the rest of your creatures in the best way I can. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're like, okay, I pump my commander plus, again, whatever, 20. Whatever it is. And all of a sudden, your commander becomes a one-shot KO and can take someone out. What other low-the-ground token makers can do that? So again, a very relevant card for both parts of it. And again, it's hyper-efficient already. It's already the right amount of efficiency that also is instant speed. And now also a combat trick for you. A great new budget card to consider. Moving on, we have been getting a lot of different variations of the same type of card, and Heritage Reclamation is yet another variation that you can consider. An instant for 1 and a green, choose 1, destroy a target artifact, target enchantment, or exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, draw a card. This essentially is the, copy-paste kind of mode for wizards these days when it comes to 2 mana, instant speed, removal in green. You'll get to get rid of an artifact, get to get rid of enchantment, or third option. And third option right here can be quite solid. It is Graveyard Hate that also replaces itself. So if you're just kind of even stuck with this card, if there isn't a good target for you for an artifact or enchantment, you've got an extra 2 mana lying around, you might not even care what card you get rid of out of a graveyard. You might just kind of utilize this as a cycling effect to say, let's get rid of this. I need to dig into something better right now. I need a haymaker. I need a lamp. Whatever you need, dig into it just by basically cycling this away and getting rid of something graveyard. Or again, against certain strategies, this can be absolutely devastating. Someone else is playing a graveyard-centric deck, an aristocrat-style deck, a deck that actually is built around getting things in the graveyard, maybe getting them back out like a reanimator deck, and they say, oh, I'm going to reanimate this one, and you say, no, my little spell right here, 2 mana, get rid of that, it's gone, and I also draw a card as well. So again, it checks the boxes for what you want for a 2 mana removal spell in green, artifact or enchantment, and also third option that is value centric for you. Yeah, this is a good card to consider for the right strategy out there. Moving on, the first uncommon I'm going to be bringing up that is actually currently over $1, but very well might be underneath $1 by the time the actual set comes out. $1.33 right now, but still a good deal for Kin Tree Severance, an instant for, well, between 3 and 6 mana of some sort, and yeah, at the very least, just 3. You're going to spend 3 mana if it's all Abzan. Exile target permanent mana value 3 or greater. This is a huge new card. This is a great new card. This is amazing removal for Abzan decks out there. Or should I say anything that's got Abzan colors plus as well. This is a card that, again, is somewhat along the lines of Despark. Despark is 1 less mana, right? It is 1 less mana. That being said, it is exiling permanents that are 4 or greater. So being able to actually go down 1 notch can, of course, help you hit some massive things like, oh, I don't know, Rhystic Study. So being able to actually give you a little bit more flexibility on what you can take out. You still can't take out anything that costs 0, 1, or 2. For the most part, again, you really care about things that cost a bit more than that anyway. So yeah, just 3 mana, out of nowhere, instant speed. Get rid of anything permanently that's mana value 3 or greater. This is a fantastic card. And of course, there is a little bit of casting flexibility with it. If you don't have, the actual Abzan mana, you can just pay a bit more if you need to, essentially, with that colorless mana as well. Or should I say, generic mana. So yeah, it's a great card. We shall see where the price ends up. Next up, yet another card that is just above $1, $1.39. We've got Rakshasha's Bargain, an instant for, again, any combination of basically between 3 and 6 mana in Sultai. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. This is a huge card draw card in Sultai. This is 3 mana, again, I'm assuming at the, you have got the actual pips, essentially. 3 mana for basically get the best 2 cards out of the top 4 and actually put the other 2 cards into a relevant place for a lot of decks out there. Basically being able to have cards in your graveyard again, that can be, for some commanders like, say, Muldrotha, an extension of your hand. It could also be for certain cards out there, like cards that have flashback, basically, again, an extension of your hand. Or, again, decks that care about the number of creatures in their graveyard, or lands in your graveyard, or getting certain things out of your graveyard, like resummoning Skeleton. It is an extension in a way, or a benefit to have certain things in your graveyard. That being said, again, just getting the best 2 cards out of the top 4, yeah, that is kind of unheard of at instant speed for 3 mana. I mean, we just recently got, like, the instant speed Divination very recently as well, the 3 mana draw 2. This is basically 3 mana, top of the 4, draw your best 2, and also put the other 2 cards into a relevant place as well. This is a huge card for Sultai decks out there, definitely a good budget card, and we'll see where that price ends up. The final card that I want to bring up on today's episode, though, is Dragon Claw Strike. Yet another one of those uncommon cards that is the 3-color, 6 mana, 3 mana, combination. This one in Teamer, and this one very budget-friendly at 27 cents. Sorcery speed, double the power toughness of target creature control until end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. When it comes to the going rate of doubling up power and toughness, Typically that is about 2 mana these days, though there are certain ones that are like, okay, I do this or this, and it's at 3 mana. That being said, yeah, being able to pay 3 mana to double up power and toughness, there's only so many of those types of effects out there, and you're willing to pay that. especially when it comes to this also being a removal spell in a way. And when it comes to fight effects, typically those cost like 1 or 2, so having the combination of both of those things, that is absolutely huge. This is basically, alright, double that creature's power and toughness, which is amazing. Again, can be game ending, and also pretty much a guaranteed removal of basically any creature on the board that you could want to remove. Again, you are doubling up power and toughness. Chances are that the creature that you're doubling up is going to be now larger than anything else on the board. So this is basically guaranteed removal on top of, well, making one of the heaviest hitters on the board, yeah, essentially an even heavier hitter. So, again, there's only so many of those doubling effects out there right now. This is yet another great one, and it is one that also acts as removal too. So it can definitely see play in the right strategy out there. A great budget buy right now. And with that, this episode is coming to a close. Comment below with your thoughts on it. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.